been an interesting week, has it not? Oh, I've been saying that way too much recently. Wouldn't it be great if we just came together on a Friday night and there was just nothing really going on? Things were just humming along. The bees were helping to move pollen from one flower to another. And we would just celebrate the springtime and Shabbat and our bar mitzvahs and anniversaries and birthdays. And that's it. Nothing really interesting going on in the world, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful? No, we're living in such interesting times, the blessing and the curse of it. But we are living in times where it is very hard to even understand what is going on. It is very hard to even understand what is true about any given situation. We get our news, we even hear recordings, we see videos, we see pictures, and still, sometimes it is very hard to understand what is really true. And even more importantly, I imagine many of you have felt, as I have felt, that not only is it hard to understand exactly what's going on, especially when so much is going on in so many places simultaneously, but it's very hard to understand, and what are we to do? For example, a very local example, a few months ago, as many of you know, a recording went viral. And the recording was of supposedly of the Pikesville principal, saying some very, very racist things, and certainly a hint of anti-Semitism as well. How many of you followed that story? And to go along with my various stories about be careful what you say to the media, it just so happened that on the day that that went viral, it happened to be one of the very, very few days that I had the chance to pick up our son from Pikesville High School. And it was surrounded with police and various TV cameras and interviewers. And of course, because of what's going on in Israel, some of the media folks recognized me and wanted to interview me. Always a bad idea to be interviewed about something that you don't really know everything about, which, by the way, is generally everything. But in this case, I said, well, I really, really hope it's not true. I really hope it's not true that the principal of this high school said such racist things. If it is true, then there should be consequences. And if it's not true, if it was a false recording created by AI, then what? Then there's also should be consequences, but then we have even more to learn. It seems so obvious to me what we need to learn if there's racism and anti-Semitism, but what if there's this new tool that we spoke about also on the high holidays, whose power and impact we don't yet fully understand. In fact, in prosecuting the former head of the athletics department, who actually created and helped spread, with the help of others, this AI-created false recording. It was false. It was created by AI, but the law actually hasn't even fully caught up to understand on what charges should the person and people responsible be held. What are we to do in a world where we don't even know what is true? We want to use our words and our language very carefully. And of course, by the way, the interview that I gave at the time was replayed on national news, on NBC and elsewhere, which I didn't even know. And of course, they took a clip, not the clip where I said, I hope it's not true. Wouldn't that have been nice? But the clip where I said something like, as a parent, I'm horrified, and as a rabbi, I'm disturbed. Anyway, I only got 1 or 2 phone calls about that. And I wasn't even in town. I was out of town for a couple of days, being with friends and family in Chicago. Where was I? What are we to do? That's just a local example of how do we use our words to criticize that which we think is going on. And boy, has there been a lot to speak about and criticize about what's going on. Pick your college campus, Pick your international situation. Pick what this university said, president said or didn't say. Pick what law enforcement did or didn't do that, or what this person did or didn't do that. Pick even a clip of any of that that you think is real. And what does this local story remind us? That might not be the whole story. We're all going to have to learn more and dig even deeper before we make any assumptions. And even when we've come to some conclusions that somebody has done something wrong, Judaism actually has a lot to say about how we should use our voices in order to critique it. On one hand, we know that we're not supposed to spread gossip, right? Does everybody know that? And in Judaism, the definition of gossip, the Hebrew term is lashon hara, which literally means the evil tongue, right? The evil tongue. Has anybody ever heard gossip? Has anybody, haven't we all even been, just by definition of being human beings, probably, well, I know that none of you have done it, but I've heard that some people, and by the way, lashon hara is not just gossip that something is incorrect. It's also just speaking about somebody in such a way, even if it's true, even doesn't she look great? It looks like she's lost weight. Well, that, friends, could be misunderstood to mean she was really overweight before, right? Depends on how you hear it and who's hearing it and how you understand it. So really what Judaism says to us is just don't speak about other people. Just don't say anything that might be misconstrued. In fact, it's best just, friends, to keep quiet. But the Torah also says that if you see someone, especially someone in your own community, who's doing something that seems to go against the Torah or against our various laws and against the things that we believe in, we are actually required to speak out. Required to speak out. So just in case you think that everything I've said until now is to tell us to just be quiet, no, the opposite. Learn everything you can and then speak out. But speak out very carefully. The Torah's term for this is tochacha. Isn't that a hard word to say? Tochacha, which literally means to reprove someone or to criticize what they've done. And in fact, the Torah, in the book that we've been reading now, actually says that if you don't do it, if you don't speak out, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you don't speak out, when you see something that's just very wrong, what are you doing? You're allowing for it. Silence is consent. Perhaps you're even saying that you agree with it. You're not just allowing it, you agree with it. You think that this kind of nonsense should be happening in our community or in our schools or what have you. You must speak out. The Torah actually says that if you fail to speak out, you are partially responsible for those sins. If we don't speak out when we see that something is wrong, it's not just if you see something, say something. It's not just that level, although that is very important. This is if you don't speak out and criticize that which you think is wrong, you're responsible for it. But the Torah is also aware, and the commentators are also aware, that there are situations when we have to be very careful about how we do that. For example, we don't want to speak out and criticize someone right now in public. If you criticized your rabbi for something right now in public, how might that go over? For me anyway. How might that feel? Or if I pointed to somebody and said, Rabbi Herman, it's true, I didn't see you at Torah study, or why didn't you come to I don't know, I'm just going to use an example for fun. I didn't see you at the Board of Rabbis meeting, right? It's true. Whether it's true or not, if he wasn't in such a good humor and if we didn't have such a good relationship, you might think I was doing what? Criticizing him, and he might feel? Shame. We have another set of laws that say we are prevented from shaming people in public. So let's say I really thought, Rabbi Herman, I'm so glad you're here today so I can use you as this example. let's say I really thought that that was wrong. We really needed him at said Baltimore Board of Rabbis meeting. How should I tell him? When should I tell him? In private, gently, letting him also know why it was so important to me, right? And then he might say, I don't know, what would you say, Rabbi Herman? I was busy. I was playing golf. I'm retired. I mean, in the first case, I'm retired. Why do you think I should have to come to those meetings? Do you know that I went to those meetings do you know he's about to celebrate 60 years as a rabbi? We're going to celebrate in June. I mean, so maybe I'm also wrong. But we could have the conversation in private. So one of the principles is to avoid embarrassment. But also, if you rebuke someone, I don't know, let's say a leader at a university campus, and you rebuke them a first time and a second time, sometimes the rabbis knew this also, that if you keep rebuking someone, we also know this about children and certainly college students and certainly teenagers, right? If you rebuke them again and again, what do they often do? They dig in who said that? They dig in those heels. The rabbis knew that. So they say, if they're not responding and they're not hearing you, you don't keep doing it. In fact, it could backfire. There could be more and more and more protests that are violent and inappropriate and dangerous and breaking the law. I'm not talking about protests that quietly, or rather peacefully, are expressions of free speech. We certainly want to support the idea of free speech. But if we see that what we're doing is backfiring, we better find another way. We better find another way. This is a very difficult period in which we find ourselves. Ultimately, what the rabbis say about all of this is that where it cannot be heard, we have to find another way. We have to speak to other people. But once it has been demonstrated that a group of people cannot hear you, if it's on issues of security or economics or politics, you have to find those who will. If it's about those who are simply expressing their opinions, then perhaps we need to listen. Yes, we need to protect ourselves, our community, our families, our students, but perhaps it almost heightens for us the need to find ways to hear those with whom we disagree. This is not easy. I know I preach about this a lot, but I want to confess that I found myself at a Passover Seder with people who I love, but with whom I disagree quite deeply about the current situation in Israel, for example. I found myself also with people of other generations, younger than me, with whom I deeply disagree. Wow, do I have a lot to learn from them. And I will also say that it is easier to hear them when they are speaking gently and respectfully. It was much harder to hear them, and one was an Israeli Palestinian, and one was a graduate student in Chicago. It was much harder to hear them when they were screaming, when they were putting down a family member. And I was very proud when that younger family member simply said, just because Palestinians are suffering doesn't mean that we aren't suffering as well. I can hear your pain, can't you hear mine? And then it continued, and then a 12th grader said, you know what, people, you're all just interrupting each other. No peace is going to be achieved if you all just keep interrupting each other and can't hear each other. And that 12th grader had so much wisdom to teach all of us. Yes, we must speak out. And yes, if we're not directly in the eyes of a storm or responsible for protecting others, then perhaps we can take this time as an opportunity to figure out how to have those intergenerational conversations, because if we can't have them, the gaps, the rifts between us are only going to grow. Indeed, there are moments where it is hard to do this, and there are moments, perhaps this one, where we must work even harder to find the opportunities. I hope that you will join me in having some of these difficult conversations amongst us in the weeks and months to come, and I hope you will join me as we also welcome college students who are returning home from colleges all across North America, and listening to them, and hearing them, and finding what we need to learn from each other, so that in the year ahead, as we approach a new Jewish year where I hope that we will find more peace, that we will be able to continue together as a community that can understand each other and hear each other even when it is rebuke, and to continue forward as one people in peace. Shabbat Shalom.